Okay, we're good to go. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out on a gray and wonderful day. I'm actually very grateful that it's normal, sort of. It's like winter out there during winter. I was getting very concerned with, 60 degrees on Christmas. This makes no sense, right? It makes no sense. So this morning, I want to continue along with what I've been doing. Even though I only give talks about once a month, I've been trying to do what I do kind of as a series. So the series started inspired by the visit from Lopan when he gave us the transmission for the Mahamudra lineage prayer. And so I kind of did a few talks about the components of that prayer. And then we moved into refuge, and I did a couple of talks on that. First, a kind of background thing, and then a more experiential thing where I talked about how to meditate on each of the repetitions of refuge in order to give your mind a chance to naturally experience what the Buddha considered to be the view. Because that's where we have to start with how we see life, how we see what's happening to us and to others, and how we fit that into some kind of understanding. Because as Buddhists, we take a vow to do no harm to ourselves or others, to do as much good as we can for ourselves and others. And in order to do those two things, we have to tame our mind. So all of this, setting up the Mahamudra lineage prayer, where it talks about the nature of mind, really, it's a complete introduction to what we call Mahamudra. So I encourage you to revisit that again and again. And then the refuge prayer is beginning to take our minds through various levels, beginning from right where we are and taking us to this level of enlightenment. Now, for most of us, we only kind of can catch a glimpse, and then boom, we're overwhelmed by hope and fear again and all of that. And so it becomes kind of like a spiral dynamic of moving into it. And then, of course, just the way we see our lives, we move away from it and recognize that, move back into it. And over time, our minds get more and more used to an enlightened perspective, a perspective where we're doing no harm to ourselves or others, and we are actually benefiting people, benefiting beings. So after the refuge prayer in most of these practices, the next thing that comes along in this stage by stage set of exercises for our mind to actually experience itself as it truly is, which is enlightened. Believe it or not, you can call off the search. You already have what you seek. All we have to do is find a way to open the door to the treasure house. Find the treasure house, open the door to the treasure house. So all these practices and the way that they're put together are meant to do that. Frankly, if Buddha could come and touch you on the head and give you a magical zap, which is what we all hope for, right? And that's why we all show up. We all just hope this time I'm going to get that magical zap. And, It'll all be okay. Well, if he could do that, he would. But what he assured us was he can't do that. We have to do it ourselves. What he was able to do was to show us a way, a path, something dependable, something reliable. And so we have the Buddha that we take refuge in because he did it. And because he was willing to teach us how to do it too. And then the Dharma, which is what he taught, very simply. And then the Sangha. That's all of those who have followed the path of the Buddha in the past and actually achieved realization. And then those of us who are on the path with the aspiration to achieve realization for the benefit of all beings. Let's just say something about realization for a second. And that is that you know how, like, when you're driving down the road and you're going too fast, and then all of a sudden you see the flashing lights in your rear view mirror, and you know you're about to be stopped by the people who say, don't drive that fast, it's against the law, and you realize you left your wallet at home and your driver's license and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's not the kind of realization we're talking about. The kind of realization we have those realizations all the time. The kind of realization we're talking about is actually a realization, a direct experience of the nature of our minds, which, according to what the Buddha taught, is open, is blissful, is luminous. And when I say open, I mean open, no center, no boundary, just completely free and open, okay? Like the vastness of space open can accommodate and contain everything because, look at it logically. It does contain everything already. Where am I? You might say, I am sitting here on the floor at Columbus KTC, but really, you don't even know that. What you know is that I appear somewhere in the apparatus in the 5.5 inches between your ears. And then that all gets translated to me being here in this building, on this floor, and so forth. But really, everything that appears and exists for you is accommodated by your mind. Where else could anything be? If it wasn't there, you wouldn't know it exists without some further research. There are invisible things. There's no doubt about that. We know that from science. There are sounds that we can't hear that bats can hear. There are sounds that we can't hear that dogs can hear, and certainly smells. They apparently can smell disease, So guess what? Our minds, what that means is our minds can even become more sensitive and more expansive. And that's part of the work of meditation, is to actually realize that potential of seeing everything as it is and responding to everything as it is appropriately, okay? So that brings us to the second part after refuge, right? So we've established the nature of mind in the lineage prayer, and then we kind of like started in our little speedy hope and fear place and needing a blessing and then getting a blessing and then going in and at least aspiring for an atmosphere inside ourselves that is generous and patient and ethical and joyous and mindfully aware and ultimately wise. So we kind of aspire for that, and then we just sink into it. It's like, okay, yep, it's already there. And through meditation, I catch this gap, and I can just be with it. Doesn't require any words, probably can't have any words. So that's the first part. The second part is, okay, we're starting to taste that. How do we live with this in the world? Well, we want to live in compassion, right? We want to live in joy. We want to live in equanimity or peace, right? So this next prayer that usually follows the refuge prayer is called the four immeasurables, or in Sanskrit, the four Brahma Viharas. I like that. It's just a nice word. And it's very simple. The four immeasurables are simply stated as an aspiration or a motivation, a prayer. And they're, may all beings, including me, be happy and have the causes for happiness. May all the beings, including me, be free of suffering and the cause of suffering. May all beings remain in joy, untainted by any stain, is the third one. And the fourth one is may all beings abide in equanimity, not holding some close and others distant. So this will take me 2 or 3 talks probably to completely unpack, and today's going to be the first one. I'd like to, at this point, start that part of the talk in the traditional way that we start talks, which is to say the refuge prayer together 3 times. Let's do it the first 2 times in English, and then the third time chant it in Tibetan. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. Sanjay Chudang Soki Choknam La Changchu Bardu Dakni Kyab Suchi Dagi Junso Yipe Sonam Ki Rola Penshir Sanjay Ruparsho. Thank you. So, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. That's nice. I wanted to do this in part because it is what follows the refuge prayer in a lot of practices, but also because I was inspired. There's a great Nyingma Lama, Dodrupchen Rinpoche, who just passed away last year. And somebody published his last will, if you will, and testament, that what he spoke to his chief attendant, his student, right before he passed. I won't read the whole thing, simply because it would be too long. But the end of it gets to the point, and he talks about being practitioners, and he talks about what we actually need to focus on in this world that we're in today. It's obvious, we've got wars going on that are horrible, and nobody knows what to do. And we've got plenty of other problems. We're entering now officially the silly season, since it's an election year, and there are going to be things that trigger all kinds of hope and fear and willful ignorance and all kinds of other mental poisons all year long. So what did the Buddha say to do with that? Magically change it all to the way you want it? No, we don't get that. He can't do it, neither can we. That's just the way it is. What he said was totally train your mind. In Tibetan, the word mind training is lojong. And there have been extraordinary texts on mind training, the most famous of which was done by a great Lama named Chikawa, and it's called the seven-point mind training. There are 59 slogans in that, and I want you to know that because you can look them up, and you can find commentaries on each slogan by students of Trungpa. He emphasized this a lot, like Pema Chodron, and I think her name is Judy Leaf, and some others that are very good. And then there are other commentaries as well. Karmapa's made a commentary. I believe Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche has a book that's essentially commentary on the 7-point mind training. Lama Kathy has done some extraordinary stuff where, like series of classes as book study, like years ago. There's this book called The Great Path of Awakening, and I encourage you, if you don't have that book, you can get that book, and you can probably not need to buy another Dharma book the rest of your life. If you're like me, you will, but you won't need to, because it's very thin, but it's really complete. It really has what you need for this second path. But even before we get to that stuff where they talk about the nuts and bolts of mind training, I want to start much more simply with this prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. And the first thing I want to say about that is the word happiness is a little bit abstract, right? Each of us in this room probably have a different happy place. And so it maybe isn't the best translation for the word that's actually used there. I've heard from Sakni Rinpoche and Mingyur Rinpoche that a better translation for that word is well-being. May all beings have well-being and the causes for well-being. Well, now we've got something to work with. Happiness is kind of like abstract. Well-being, not so much. You know when you feel good, you know when you don't. You know when you're anxious, you know when you're at peace, and so forth. So, without cultivating mind training, we can get into a lot of trouble, because mind training actually, according to the Buddha, all suffering is caused by clinging and particularly clinging to things that don't really exist, not real things. That includes ourself. You know, we all have a self-perception. We think we know who we are, all that. And a lot of that has to do with we know what our habits are. We know what we like. We know what we don't like. We know what we hope for. We know what we fear. And all that together makes me. Buddha says, that's not who you are. That's just a layer of thinking that's obscuring who you actually are, all right? And this path is about uncovering it. So if we don't take this seriously, there's a problem. And that's what Dodrupchen Rinpoche was talking about. Toward the end of his little discourse, he said, there are retreatants who stay many years on retreat, meditating on deity yoga, development and completion stages, and so forth, but whose minds are still not imbued with renunciation or bodhicitta, and their backs are turned in the opposite direction from the authentic path. So renunciation and bodhicitta, I'm going to interrupt him here. What do we renounce? Well, ultimately, we renounce this false sense of self we have. Like, we don't go to war anymore over our preferences. Okay? We stop that. So what we're renouncing is this narrative, this story we have about ourselves. And rather than chasing after that, protecting that, doing everything to serve that, we let it go and just relax in the openness that includes everything. And we try to develop over time through different exercises to make our minds stronger, some equanimity about all that. So our preferences aren't kind of like pushing us around life, and our aspirations for kindness and compassion can begin to aim our energies and efforts in life, okay? And that aim for kindness and compassion, that's what bodhicitta is. Bodhicitta literally means awakened mind. Well, what are we awakened to? Well, when we're asleep, so to speak, it's all about me. It's like whether you're going to like this talk or not, you know? Or it's this afternoon, you know, what am I going to do with that time? It's all me, me, me. It's the book about me. And in bodhicitta, we let go of that. And because we let go of it, we begin to see that we're all connected, that we're not just limited to what's inside this bag of skin and bones here, but we're actually, who we are extends beyond this. And it includes all of you. And once you realize that, once you see it even for a second, you begin to care about these other pieces of yourself and whether they have what they need to be happy or not, okay? So that is the beginning of bodhicitta. The ultimate aspect is seeing interdependence, seeing that you're not just this. There's this luminous openness. And the relative part of bodhicitta is, okay, given that, we appear as separate things and so forth. So the relative part is the nuts and bolts, the training for how we relate to each other in such a way that we can all wake up to who we really are. So this luminous openness, so that we can all stop harming ourselves and others so that we can all participate in doing good for each other and so forth. So anyway, he's saying, if you're not focused on that at the beginning of whatever practice, even if you're sitting in a cave on retreat doing deity practice for years, you will be practicing up in a cave where it's not very comfortable, and you will have turned your back on the authentic path. So he's saying, don't do that. He goes on to say, there are many demons who were once big-named lamas and hermits who spent many years on retreat. But because they did not tame their own minds, they went down the wrong path and ultimately became reborn as ghosts and demons who have taken the life breath of many sentient beings. The root cause of all this is not taming one's own mind. That's what it comes down to. So I asked the Lopants, the teachers, please only teach the lojong, the mind training, mind-taming practices that tame the mind stream. Focus your teachings on the mind training practices and teach in such a way that tears helplessly fall from your students' eyes. Without mind training, they will not become good Dharma practitioners. And if you teach mind training well and people practice mind training, they will become good practitioners. Well, I read that and I thought, okay, I guess that's what I need to do, is talk about some lojong here. The truth is that our minds are like puppies. They're cute. They're lovable. We want to provide them a nice place, and nice food, and all that kind of thing. But if you don't train your puppy, it's going to pee all over your house and other things. And it's going to eat your clothes and your shoes and maybe even your furniture. We had a dog once that just ate the furniture. The legs were just, that's amazing. And they'll dive bomb visitors who come to see you with love and excitement. And somehow those visitors, often when a puppy is dive bombing them, don't feel the love. Our minds are like that. So we have to train them. There are a lot of ways, and we'll just talk about a couple of them. But the first one, the first basic way, is meditation. And in particular, there are these, I think they're called the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And so when we start doing shamatha, you take beginning meditation class, and you get this idea of being able to rest your mind on your breath. And you realize that you can let go of a thought. It's a very powerful thing. And then there's some refinements that help us to deal with this training the mind. It's a way of breaking down that shamatha practice so it naturally engenders some insight meditation. In our tradition, this union of calm abiding meditation, shamatha, and laktong, insight meditation, is loosely what we call Mahamudra, the highest meditation experience. So when we're doing these practices, actually, what I've found in practical experience is is that one thing leads to another. Years ago, when I first started teaching meditation in prison, we were teaching shamatha to death row inmates. This was at the beginning, something that developed into a really wonderful thing. And there was one student there named Carl, and we taught this, just calm abiding practice. And that first day during the question and answer, he raised his hand. He said, well, I don't have a question, but I want you to know that this is the most powerful thing I've ever heard. I never knew I could let go of a thought. Well, that's the beginning of mind training right there. I never knew I could let go of a thought. If I would have stayed on the street, had I lived this long, and he suspected he probably wouldn't have, he said, I never would have learned this. So now I'm grateful that I'm in prison. That right there is a kind of tour de force of what mind training is like. The next month we came back and started out with questions rather than with meditation instruction. I find that sometimes it's good to start out with a little discussion and end with meditation, even though we usually do it the other way around, simply because we need to start where we are and we need to get here. And if we're just like blocking what's going on in our lives and show up in the Dharma Center and do practice, we haven't engaged in what Dodrupchen Rinpoche said, which is renunciation. That's actually not rejecting your life. That's embracing it and seeing it for what it is. It's a kind of letting go with wisdom. And we haven't, at that point, if we just like block everything, we also have very little opportunity to develop this kind of loving and compassionate point of view. It's like we're strongly trying to get away from life instead of go deeply in it and find loving kindness and compassion within whatever the situation is, right? So anyway, we start with a little talk and questions and answers, and Carl raises his hand and he says, this practice has been going well, but it troubles me. And I said, what troubles you about it? I couldn't at that point imagine what could trouble somebody about calm abiding meditation. And he says, it troubles me that I feel so much better, and yet the people that were victims of me killing their relative still are full of hate and anger. I know they think of me every day and it brings up bad feelings. What can I do about that? Well, look what happened. From a bird's eye view, he started meditating and he calmed down. And maybe for the first time since he originally was convicted, he started worrying about his victims instead of trying to figure out what the court case could be for him to get parole someday, which is one of the main things that people in prison can worry about, right? Instead of worrying about that, he's like, what can I do for these people? So I said, well, there's a lot of merit accumulated by meditation. You can dedicate the merit of your practice to them. He said, that's a great idea. My point to you this morning is, though, that compassion naturally arose in him from meditation because he didn't turn his back on things as they are. You know, he didn't turn his back on things as they are and his aspiration to make them better. He didn't use meditation just to block out the horribleness of being in prison, particularly on death row, which is really no fun. Difficult place to be. Garchen Rinpoche was told by his teacher, Khenpo Munsel, in prison. Garchen Rinpoche he's like in his 80s now, but he was one of the monks that got caught when the Chinese invaded Tibet, and they threw him in prison and tortured him and they were pretty awful. They prevented them all from practicing the Dharma. Of course, you can't prevent somebody from training their mind, though. So what were they doing there? They were doing mind training. And his teacher told him, if you want to know how your practice is, see what it's like for you in bad circumstances. Then you'll know. Are you getting all wound up or not in bad circumstances? When your shamatha practice is good and you can let go of a thought, sometimes things come up, and it doesn't mean they go away because you let go of the thought and the story that you've attached to whatever is going on. No, not at all. They don't go away. But you have more luminous spaciousness rather than just your reactions and your habits and the way this me always reacts to these kind of situations. So Khenpo Munsel said, you'll know how you're doing based on how you respond when the Chinese guards break your feet again. Because that was one of the things the Chinese liked doing, was breaking the feet of the monks. They didn't want them doing walking meditation either. It was horrible. And so Garchen Rinpoche shares that. And I think what I wanted to do here was to say, as a start to mind training, let's look at shamatha a little more closely. I had a note here that I wanted to find. All right. I didn't find it, but I know what it is. So we all know what it's like when we get a little pressure. We have a lot of pressure in our life in the Western world. You know, even this morning, getting ready to come in and give this talk, you know, you can feel inside a little hope and a little fear, a little anxiety, things get a little speedy, right? You can always tell when your mind has stepped away from this openness by that feeling of speed that you have inside. You know how with athletes, they say when they're in the zone, things just slow down for them? That's because even if they're, say, an NFL quarterback and they have a 350-pound guy about to hit them, things have slowed down for them because they know where they are, they know what they're doing, they're well-trained. And then they execute some fabulous play and everybody goes, ooh, ah, and all of that. Well, the same is true for all of us in our daily life. When we feel this speediness, that's our puppy getting kind of excited and about to do whatever it habitually does, right? We're the same. With mind training, things can slow down, and it's step by step. So there are these 4 meditations on mindfulness. And the first one is, when we teach what they call the 7 points of Virochana, where we learn how to sit, right? With our legs crossed and our back straight but relaxed, our chin tucked in and a little, tongue at the roof of the mouth. And sometimes when you just sit like this without doing anything, you have what Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche used to call a harmonious surprise. It's like, you feel a little relief just when you get on the cushion. There's a sense of body being grounded, being supported by earth. I mean, we're not going to fly off even though we're going tens of thousands of miles an hour whirring around through space. We can't even feel it. We feel still. We're not really still. I mean, from a satellite's point of view, we're going tens of thousands of miles an hour right now. Anyway, so we feel this openness that comes with just being grounded. So that's called mindfulness of body. Just feeling your body present in this place, feeling the security of gravity holding you down to the ground, not going to fly off somewhere out of control. So we simply sit up straight and we feel that. And then we take a deep breath in. You can do this along with me. And we let it out. And you can almost feel your consciousness drop, kind of below your belly button. Just openness. And you can do it again, and you begin to feel the relaxation of feeling. Feeling being both sensation and the sensations that come because emotions have come up. We all know that when we get a little afraid, we tighten up a little bit. You get a little speedy when we're afraid, and we get a little tight. Well, when we're sitting here, so this is the beauty of the Dharma practice, step by step. You can feel all the way below your navel as you exhale, and you can be aware of a little tightness in your body here, or a little tightness in your body there, a little speediness in your mind that's a little uncomfortable. You become aware of these things rather than try to get rid of them. Just like in shamatha, we don't try to get rid of our thoughts. They'll do what they do. That's fine. We just let them go. We notice them, and we even smile to them. Smiling is a really important practice. I will tell you this. That's a big secret of the morning. When you practice meditation, and you see your puppy dog, your internal puppy dog, do what you do with a puppy dog. You smile at the puppy dog. And you say, now I'm going to train you. I'm going to help you. And once you're trained, you're going to be even happier than you are now. That's also true of puppy dogs. And so you just look at the tightness and the speediness, and you let it go of the story that might be around it, the story about family or friends, or the story about what's going on at work, or the story of what a drag it is that I've been meditating so long and I'm still not enlightened yet. Whatever the story is, doesn't matter. Just you let go of the story, you just smile, and you can feel that speediness slow down. That's the second thing. That's mindfulness of feeling. Okay? It's very powerful to do it. Then the third thing is to work with the speediness directly. And with the third thing, consciously slow down your breath. So we've worked on body and we've worked on feeling, or the stories we tell ourselves, speech. Now we'll work on mind and consciously make your breath gentle and slower. Let your exhalations be slower. And you'll feel that almost like energies come back into alignment in your body and settle down and become more peaceful. At the point where you start to feel this slow down a little bit, you're going to start to feel a little well-being. So guess what? That's the first line of the prayer. May all beings have happiness, well-being, and the causes of happiness. And the cause of happiness is simply letting go of the narrative and relaxing. From that point of view, the fourth training in mindfulness is mindfulness of meditation itself. And that can naturally arise when you're obviously not here in 3 minutes, but when you're home on your cushion, if you go through these 4 stages, you'll become aware that there's a meditator and a meditation and something meditated upon. And then you'll realize you can let go of that too. That the meditator and the meditation and what it's being meditated upon are all just kind of light in the atmosphere. You can meditate on your meditation that way and let go into vast openness and rest. And if you can do that, you establish a kind of well-being in yourself where all the energies are in balance, no matter what's going on, even when you're sick. It's a strong and open kind of state of mind. It's well-being. So that's the first line in that prayer. May all beings have happiness and its causes. And one of the miraculous things is that if you give this to yourself every day, it's quite a gift. Just by walking around, just by people seeing you, just by people hearing you, just by people realizing they're connected to you. They are connected whether they realize it or not, but when they realize it, they can be benefited. You know, there's always these people in your life, and when you're around them, you just feel better. Well, that's part of what being a bodhisattva is all about, is for us to train our minds in such a way that what we're present to internally is this luminous openness. And by doing so, we begin to have some kind of insight into what relative bodhicitta is, what our enlightened activity might be. Jim Dunn tells this story of an old Zen monk that I just love, who his last words to his attendant said, "Master, what's the quintessence of all your practice and your life as a monk?" And he said, "The appropriate response." And then he passed away. The appropriate response. So obviously, the kind of lives we have to respond to all kinds of things. When we're just crazy puppies, or if Mingyur Rinpoche calls it monkey mind, when we're just crazy like that, we're not really responding, right? I mean, we're reacting based on what our habits are, what our beliefs are, what all the baggage we carry around just gives us kind of this setup so that life triggers something and we respond with that because that's who we are. Well, as bodhisattvas, life hands us something, and rather than being locked in the prison of our reactions, our reactivity, we can see that. It's not that it goes away. We can see it. It's like, oh, there's that. And upon seeing it, we can drop it. And in that openness, with the blessings of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we have a pretty good chance of an appropriate response. And that's the path that we're on. So, there's a poem There were two, actually, that I wanted to share with you. It's always good in the morning to get up and have a little Dharma routine. For me, I get up and I open my shrine up. I like doing that. It's a meditative experience. I'm taking refuge. I'm doing offerings. I'm resting in the nature of feeling connected to all of you and to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And even if I only spend 5 or 10 minutes with it, it has a powerful impact on my day, you know? As a practitioner, I like to have enough time to sit and do these, you know, mindfulness exercises, even better yet. But failing that, sometimes things are a little intense. I found this thing that Lin-Manuel Miranda hung in the dressing room of Hamilton. It says, "Good morning, eyes up, hearts up, mind sharp, compassion on full blast. Okay, let's go." And you know, just reading that, see, it made you smile. It's powerful. It gives you just hearing words like that gives you a sense of well-being. So, I'd say I want to kind of give an assignment here because I think it's important. Your assignment's simple. Find a daily practice for yourself, something you can do every morning. You can even do it when you sit up in bed, even if it's 30 seconds. Find something like this that makes you smile, that reminds you mindfulness of body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of mind, mindfulness of meditation. Even just thinking those 4 thoughts sometimes will cause your mind to enter that. And try it every day. Because when we say, may all beings be happy and have the causes of happiness, or may all beings have well-being and the causes of well-being, that's the beginning. The second part is, may all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. Well, this kindness, this wishing people happiness is kindness, which is in itself wisdom. Don't ever be confused about that. When everybody talks about wisdom, and it can get real highfalutin in Buddhism, it's really just kindness. That's it. That's it. Kindness. Compassion is having the skill to remove suffering from others. And that definitely requires training. So the next time, we'll talk about compassion in the way that we talked about kindness today or happiness today. And there are specific exercises for that, the most famous of which is called Tonglen, taking and sending. And I want to spend a little time next month talking about that. Practicing Tonglen is really important, and but it has to start with mindfulness, the 4 mindfulnesses. Otherwise, you could wind up like one of those monks that have been reborn as ghosts and demons because you're not pointed in the right direction. So I think it's really important to understand it well and practice well. So that, I think, is a good place to finish this. And there's like 5 minutes left. If anybody has any comments about anything, any questions about anything, I'd be happy to try to come up with an appropriate response.
Hello, thank you for the talk today.
Sure, good to see you.
How did you get involved teaching mindfulness to death row inmates?
How did I get involved teaching mindfulness in prison?
To the death row inmates.
Oh, well, actually, it started with that fellow right there who teaches mindfulness downstairs from time to time. He was a prison psychologist and a friend of mine, and we had a little meditation group at my house, and he said, why don't you come teach meditation to my group sometime? And I did, and I really liked it. Frankly, I liked it because I learned more by teaching than I ever did by anything else. I mean, it kind of put me on the spot, and I had to grow, and these guys in prison, they deserved a lot better than I could bring. So it helped me get motivated to work on myself a bit. And that ended at a certain point. And Lama Kathy came into the meditation instructors meeting like a couple years later and said, I have an invitation to go teach meditation up at the Supermax in Youngstown. Who wants to go? And so I raised my hand, and there were a few of us there. And it went on for 13 years until COVID. And frankly, I just got to an age where I couldn't risk COVID. It could be serious for me. So I had to stop in like 2020. But one of the groups that we were invited to work with was guys on death row, and there were some other groups too. So
Interesting, thank you.
yeah, the guys down there in Chillicothe, it's not in Youngstown anymore, in Chillicothe, I'm still in touch with a little bit, and they're interested in having people come down again once a month. So if anybody is interested in learning how to teach meditation in prison, just email info@columbusktc.org, and the message will get to me, and we can meet and talk about that. So if any of you are interested, it's a wonderful thing to do, and I'd be happy to help you.
Hello. So this is a question I had about just going about daily life.
Could you speak up? Yeah.
Knowing about daily life.
Yeah.
So that when I'm working with people, and I'm currently in school, so when I'm interacting with peers,
Yeah.
oftentimes I'll get feelings of, I'll have anger,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes I feel that anger is justified, and to be, if somebody does me wrong or doesn't fulfill a commitment. But I understand that anger is a very destructive emotion, and so I don't really express it. I just kind of contain it, which in itself is, I think, destructive too.
It can be, yeah.
So one thing, I had a thought that, like, is it possible to use that feeling skillfully? So that's my question.
Actually, the answer is yes. It is. There are a number of different ways of working with it, okay? So, first of all, you got to recognize that once you're angry, that something has happened and you might not have even been aware of it in the moment, and it actually hit your anger button, and you don't even know that, and then all of a sudden you're angry and you know that, right? So there's a process. In terms of daily practice, if you do practice shamatha on a daily basis, you'll get used to a certain feeling of openness and well-being. That's one of the good side effects. It's not the reason you should do it, but it's a good side effect. Conversely, you'll also notice when you start getting tight and speedy. And if you feel tight and speedy, even before it registers as a reaction, as anger, you can look directly at that tightness and speediness and slow down your breathing and just let it go and stay open in it. That's not easy to do, but that's the first thing you can do. The second thing, if you're already angry, you can use a practice which is the next one that I'll be talking about, Tonglen. And this Lama Kathy's got some things on lamakathy.net. It's a good resource, everybody. Take a look there. She's got some various short articles on Tonglen. But one of them is very useful, say, off the cushion. And that is when you feel like any afflictive emotion come up in you, like anger, recognize it, and you say a little prayer to yourself and say, may my anger contain all the anger of all the people in the world right now that are angry. Billions. I mean, when you're angry, you can't get angrier than you are. I mean, it's like binary, right? It's on, off. So you might as well contain the anger of everybody and take it all on. Remove the suffering of others and make the wish that all beings could be free of anger in the future. Really, the anger itself is just indicative of something that you don't like, whatever it is. It's very high energy, it's got a lot of clarity, it's often incorrect in understanding why something is going on, but it does give you clarity and energy. And so if you can just get some openness, you may find a response that could help. Let me see if I can think of an example. So if you go to somebody's house and their puppy dog jumps on you and hits you hard with its nose, and you can get angry, right? It certainly won't. The puppy shouldn't do that. It's unjust. It's unfair. All of that. It's just not the way it should be. That puppy should have been trained. Yeah? Well, you can't figure out what to do when your mind is full of those stories. So if you have a little bit of a daily practice and you see the stories popping up and you just drop them. You say, and you may have the opportunity to have some insight of what the best thing to do is. Like, I can tell you if you scratch a dog behind its ears, they'll stop jumping and they'll just lay there and bliss out, and everybody's happy. So the issue when you're dealing with a situation where there's a lot of anger is, if you prosecute your point very much, it's likely to only make things more complicated and possibly more intense. Rarely solves a problem. Sometimes if you get crazy enough, you can put everything at halt, but then everybody's just frozen, don't know what to do, maybe afraid of you. But it's better if you can figure out in what way you can scratch that situation behind its ears. And that's a creative thing. And that creativity only arises, like all creativity, in openness, right? So I would just encourage you to have a daily practice. And as you go down the Dharma path, look at how to use anger as a way into compassion. You're not the only one who gets angry, brother. We all get angry. And so, the point at which you can identify with everybody and want to remove that suffering changes everything right away. I think that's the end of the Carl story too, as he said that that thing about his victims. They're angry at him. What can he do? And he did. He ended up dedicating the merit of his practice to them. He ended up doing Tonglen for them. And years later, they reached out, unprovoked. I mean, there's no contact allowed. They reached out to the state and actually wanted to meet with him to see if they could reconcile. It's a little bit of a miracle story. Took years, but it did happen. And there's more to that also, more to that story. So I hope that helps. I don't know if that helps or not. Look at lamakathy.net and look at Tonglen Off the Cushion. I think that's what it's called.
Thank you.
Tonglen in Daily Life might be what it's called. And it's just a great strategy for working with emotions in the world, Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Well, folks, now we've run well over, which I do that sometimes. So there's what's called the dedication of merit on your sheets here. And let's just read it one time in English. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is, Samantabhadra, who knows in the same way, and all the bodhisattvas that I may follow in their path. I completely dedicate all this virtue. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Don.